What's up, good people? Welcome back to the Basketball Society podcast. If you're new to the show and you're a basketball fan, you love this game as much as I do, please subscribe wherever you're listening from. We're on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. If you're on YouTube, there's a lot more basketball content for you to enjoy on the Basketball Society YouTube channel. Definitely subscribe if you want to listen to the show. All the episodes, the audio episodes on there are on the YouTube channel, and video episodes featuring me and other special guests, coaches, videographers, players, all kinds of people. And we've got a lot more great stuff coming to you on the Basketball Society podcast. So be sure to subscribe if you're on YouTube, and if you're on Apple Podcasts, make sure you're subscribed and leave a rating and review of the show when you have a minute. I would really appreciate that. And I appreciate you for being here and tapping in. So I want to talk about the most interesting storyline for the Houston Rockets. And they've had a lot of interesting storylines going, and they may be one of the more interesting teams in the league this year. In terms of their roster, I love what they've put together. They have a high draft pick, a top 5 draft pick, who looks like he can be a contributor and a really good player right away. You know, tall guard, playmaking guard in Amen Thompson. I love that they picked up Fred VanVleet, championship level hybrid guard. His first kind of opportunity as he was taking on lead guard responsibilities in Toronto really ever since Kyle Lowry left. So he has a little bit experience doing that, but he's in the Western Conference now, really as like the veteran lead guard of this team. The Houston Rockets roster, I could go down the line, but really they might be going 10 deep. A really good and underrated playmaking big in Şengün. I know a lot of people are really high on him and should be, because he's a really special, really skilled player. Jalen Green, people are expecting Jalen Green to take that next step as a potential, upcoming young star in the league, right? Jabari Smith Jr., who I'm really high on, as a shot maker and as a high level wing player. Like, the Rockets they picked up Dylan Brooks, who's just, he's Dylan Brooks. He's just going to cause problems. So they've picked up some veterans. They have really dynamic, young players at different positions, skill players. There's a lot to like about what the Houston Rockets have to offer just from their roster and what they could put on the floor this season. But the most interesting part about the Houston Rockets, the most interesting storyline to me ever since this happened, is their head coach, the head coach that they hired, Ime Udoka, being back in the league after the way he went out is really interesting to me. And this has nothing to do, well, it has something to do with the way he went out and the story in Boston and all that, but I'm not going into that. You know me, I'm really just talking about the basketball. And as a basketball coach, the last time we saw Ime Udoka coaching in the NBA, he was in the finals, coaching Boston against the Warriors. They lost, but it seemed like he was just starting to put his imprint on the NBA as a head coach and really start to show what his coaching identity was. And Boston was just starting to kind of exude that. And that was part of what got them to the finals. They were taking on his identity. He was starting to really show his kind of, discipline, hard nose, but also like modern, up to date and creative, offensively and defensively sound and structured. I mean, he comes from Popovich and the San Antonio way. He was just starting to show who he was and what he could do as a head coach. And the whole scandal and story comes out in Boston, and just like that, he's out of the league. I find it fascinating because now he's with a totally different group. It's like he's starting from scratch. But again, Houston has done a really nice job putting together what should be a playoff worthy roster, in my opinion. I think Houston can make the playoffs in the West. I wouldn't go any higher than a 6 seed, but I would say as a 6, 7, or 8 seed, it definitely could make the play-in if it comes to that. I think they're deep enough. They've got young talent. They've got a little bit of just enough veteran presence to win them some games. Like, I think they can be just above 500. Ime Udoka is going to be the biggest reason why the Houston Rockets either have a successful season or are like a below average team. And right away, I mean, I saw a few things just from training camp and media day and things like that people are talking about, what the players are saying about him. I saw something about how I think maybe one of the first days of practice or camp or something, like he's been writing on the board the numbers like 20, 21, 19. And these are numbers. These are the number of wins that the Rockets have had the last few years. So, things like that, certain coaches do when they come in, when they're really trying to set the tone, like, hey, this is not us anymore. We're doing things totally differently, similar to like Deion Sanders when he goes to Colorado, right? It's like right away, I'm looking you in the eyes and letting you know, like, this is not who we are. We are not settling for this. We're not playing basketball this way. We're not okay with losing. We're not going to lose. We are going to be better. Now, Ime Udoka does have, again, the advantage of a much better roster. Houston's kind of been building like on their young roster, but I like the moves they've made to build like a competitive roster. So he has something to work with based on the roster where they are. No one sees them as a title contender or a top team in the West or in the league, but they have potential. So for a coach like Ime Udoka to go from just being in the finals, having a championship level roster, now he's in the Western Conference with a potential roster that could make the playoffs, that could make some noise, that could be a thorn in the side of some teams of their conference. That to me screams, okay, we're about to see, can Ime Udoka really coach? I mean, we know he can coach, but let's see what he can do with this group. Let's see how well this dude can really coach now. And I think that's really exciting because, again, I like the roster. I like the talent they have. I like the diversity they have in talent and skill at different positions, the youth, the athleticism. You added Fred VanVleet at the point of attack. I mean, I'm really excited to see what Houston can do. And I really think their ceiling has everything to do with Ime Udoka, the culture that he sets in, the system that he establishes, the way that they play, their temperament, how they handle certain situations. I mean, a lot of that stuff comes down to coaching. And I'm looking forward to seeing Ime Udoka's kind of comeback to NBA coaching with this kind of roster, because that I feel like that has everything to do with what they can actually achieve this season, what kind of noise they can actually make. Because I know one thing about coaches like Ime Udoka, they set high standards. Like, he may be telling them, like, think of yourselves as a championship team, as a top 4 team in the West. He may be, like, just between them in the locker room, he may be saying that to them. Like, listen, that's our mentality. Maybe he has been saying that in public. I don't know. But he strikes me as that type of coach where he's not just telling them, like, hey, think playoffs. We're a playoff team. They have players. They have players that have been to the playoffs that have won championships. Fred VanVleet, I mean, he may be the only one on their team that's won. I think they picked up Jeff Green, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's on their roster, and he just won with Denver last year. So they have players that have won and that know what they're doing. And they have young players that are very talented and dynamic and skilled and athletic. When you have a lot of just a bunch of players that can play, and you need the sum of their parts to really come together and do something somewhat special, that's when you turn and say, okay, who's the coach? And based on how Ime Udoka went out, based on how we last saw him versus the group he has now, I just find that one of the most fascinating low-key storylines of the NBA season. And I think that's where you look at the potential of the Houston Rockets this season. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. My name is Martin Soaries. Again, if you're listening from Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating and review. of the show. I would really appreciate that. Please subscribe wherever you're listening from. If you're on Apple Podcasts or on the YouTube channel, please subscribe and leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts on this topic. Ime Udoka, the Houston Rockets this season. Any thoughts, expectations? Definitely hit me on the YouTube channel, especially. You can leave comments under the video and let me know your guys' thoughts, because I definitely want to know what you guys think. I just think this is going to be one of the more fascinating things, seeing Ime Udoka back on the sidelines with that kind of group in Houston. It's going to be a really fun NBA season again. So again, stay tapped in. Make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you're listening from. I'm Martin Soaries. I appreciate you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you guys next time.